Greetings, I'm Addi Banks, and welcome to Let's Talk Race Now, where we talk to people from all walks of life about their race and ethnic truths. I believe that in order for us to formulate viable race relation solutions, we must hear from everybody. So let's talk race now. Today, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Karen Moore. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed.
Thank you so much for having me, Miss Addi. I'm honored.
Well, we are the ones who are truly blessed. A little about Dr. Moore. She was born and grew up in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and is one of 4 offspring. Dr. Moore holds certificates in graphic design and programming from web technology and received a doctorate in arts and worship. She married in 2005 and is the stepmother of 4. Dr. Moore is the CEO of the Color of Beautiful Media and Entertainment Group. She is the founder of I Am the Color of Beautiful Global, an initiative whose focus is on redefining the standard of beauty for women of color and helping them move beyond the hurt and trauma of colorism. She hosts 2 TV shows on the Color of Beautiful streaming TV channel and recently received her first short film, Who Told You Your Black is Not Beautiful? We will learn a lot more about this and Dr. Moore. Again, welcome.
Thank you so much.
First question, what are your familiars? What are the things that when you think about growing up that make you smile or make you think a little harder, but your familiars growing up, the people who were around you and the events that shaped you?
Well, I was blessed to grow up with both my parents in the home. And I was a daddy's girl. I was truly a daddy's girl. And I remember so much love and warmth and celebration in our home. My dad was a big Christmas person. And I remember how, he would put up the lights and we would decorate the tree and all of that. And so I remember so much about that. And my dad actually passed away at a young age at 55. And so that was quite a traumatic point, I think, for me in my life for when he passed away. And I remember the last thing he said to me was for us to take care of our mother, which we did. And mommy lived to be 92. And so we took care of her. And especially in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years of her life, she required 24-hour care. And so my sister and I worked it out to do that because she was such a pivotal and inspirational part of our lives. Also, mom was. And even to see her deal with the loss of her husband and to keep going for so long. There was a 6-year difference in their ages. She was 6 years older than him. So to see her still live 30 some years after he passed was really, really an amazing thing. And I have great memories of my childhood and I have great memories of being loved and being taught such values. We were given, because, that was back in the days when, I brought you in this world, I'll take you out, right? So we were brought up with a lot of values and a lot of discipline and a lot of appreciation for life and for the things that we were given. We may not have had, my mom was a stay-at-home mom because that's the way my dad wanted it. my mom told the story that she asked my dad one time about helping her around the house, and he told her he didn't tell her to work. He told her to stay home and take care of his children. So she came off her job and stayed home and took care of us. And I just remember so much love and appreciation within the home and discipline, and being able to value what we had and what we were given and what was provided for us. We were taught to value that, and that, it's just because, your parents brought you into this world, that, at 18, we were basically told to at 18 that, now it's time for you to start figuring out what you're going to do and take care of yourself. But I just value so much my childhood and being brought up in a loving, nurturing, discipline home.
Amen to all of that. Tell me about your community, the support system or lack of.
There was great support system, I would say, within the family. Now, again, being brought up in a very disciplined, very sort of strict household, we were not really allowed to go and stay overnight at different people's house if they weren't family. I used to tell my friends when they talked about staying over, I'm like, my dad's going to want name, social security number, blood type, everything. We were not allowed to do a whole lot of staying overnight. And even at that time during the 60s, I don't think it was, you still had concerns, not like I think you have concerns now, but even so, my dad and my mother and father still had concerns about where you were staying, who you were staying with. And so there wasn't a whole lot of staying overnight, but my dad's side of the family was a very large side of the family. And so there was a lot of cousins, and we had support within the family. And as I got older, I always had the support of my family, I would say. I had a great support system within the family.
Excellent. What about school, church, those environments? Was there connectiveness with that?
School, I would say not so much, because I went to a private school, and it was a small private school at the time. And my graduating class was about 40 people, and 5 of us were Black.
Okay.
So there wasn't that whole sense of a whole lot of community at school. And it was a Christian school. And not that I would say that there was any sort of race issue per se, but it wasn't a whole lot of, coming over your house or getting together things. There wasn't a whole lot of that with the Black and white students. And with the Black students, we formed a sort of community with ourselves. We did, but there wasn't a whole lot of outside community with the white students. In college, my first year I spent at Fisk University, which was an all Black college. And so there was a lot of community there. When I left Fisk, I came back home because my dad said I wanted to come home too much. So I needed to go to college in Philadelphia. So I came here and I went to a college that was, I would say it was still predominantly a white school, but we had a Black student union. That's what they called them at the time, the Black
Mhm.
student union. So I think there was more of a community around the race per se, or the ethnicity per se, than a community within the whole community of the college. I went to predominantly Black churches. So, there's still that idea of the community within your race or your ethnicity.
Okay. Next question. What was expected of you as a child?
I
You
was
talked
expected to
about your
be
discipline and listening, but what were you told is our expectation of you?
we were expected to behave. My mom would always tell us when she took us out, if you don't embarrass me, I won't embarrass you. So
Those things that Black children hear. It, you know,
Yes.
talk about culture. It doesn't matter where you are. You can be in Mississippi and you can be in Pennsylvania.
Yes. Yes. So we were expected to behave ourselves and to act like young ladies. Um, we were expected to do our work. We were expected to do our homework. We were expected, and I tell people all the time, my mom, because she was home with us, was very on top of our schooling and what we were supposed to be doing. And I mean, she would never understand if we said we didn't have homework. What do you mean you don't have homework? So she would say, read the next chapter and be prepared for class tomorrow. So we were expected to be very conscious and very devoted to learning and to reading and to writing and to being able to properly express ourselves and to be able to carry on a conversation. The conversations we were allowed to be in, because again, back in those dark ages, children were seen and not heard. So you weren't expected, you were not in adult conversations. But when as you grew and as people had conversations with you, the idea was that you were supposed to be able to present yourself properly and carry on a conversation. My dad was a school teacher, so he was a biology teacher, and of course that was my worst subject. But we were nonetheless expected to do our very best all the time, and that you were expected to achieve certain things. They didn't want A's and B's. They didn't expect to see too many C's, and there were no D's, E's, and F's at all. None. None. And they were questioning why you got the C. Why did you get the C?
That's right. What else do you have to do? This is your job.
Yes. Yes. They were washing dishes. I think one time my mom asked my dad for a dishwasher, and he said, what do we need a dishwasher for? We got 2 dishwashers. That was me and my sister.
That's right.
It's like, I don't need to buy a dishwasher. They're chores. We had to keep our rooms clean. We had to be up at a certain time of the day. There was none of this laying in bed until 10, 11. No, we were up by 9 o'clock in the morning, and we had chores to do. And even as I got to be in my teens and 18 and 19 and 20, I had a curfew. My parents did not deal with this coming in the house. I had a curfew. And they're like, if you don't like it, there's the door. You're old enough now to go live on your own. So I had a curfew at 22, 23, when I was still at home going to school. I had a curfew, and I was expected to obey that curfew. And I would tell guys when I went out on dates, my dad said I had to be home at 12 o'clock. I need to be home at 10 of. Okay, 10 of 12, I have to be home.
Are you sure you were in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
It sounds like you were in North Carolina.
Yes, I was in Philadelphia.
Yes. Because that sounds all too familiar. This
Yes.
comes to the question similar to the last. How were you defined? Thinking racial.
Thinking racial. I was a little dark girl. Thinking racially. I was told I was told a lot that I talked white, which I don't, I would say to people, what does that mean? What does that mean? I talk white. I don't understand what that means. So you're saying because I try to speak proper English, that's talking white? No, I'm talking proper English. So I was always, and I've been told that I'm intimidating, which, I didn't get that either, but okay. And that I have this air about me. And, it was funny to me because I had to, when people say, when more than one person tells you something, you start, trying to look at yourself and seeing if, there's something that you're portraying or that you're giving off that is causing people to feel that way about you. And the one thing that I learned is that I am confident and I walk in confidence, and I walk in power. And I remember seeing something recently that said, if your light is too bright, give people some sunglasses. So, that's kind of where I am. If I'm too much for you, or you don't feel like you can connect with me, that's really not my issue. That's yours. And I'm going to, I was brought up a certain way, and I was brought up to speak proper English, which I try to do as often as I can. Sometimes I think, I'm a little off on that, but I try to speak proper English. I try to speak the way that my parents taught me to speak. And it has nothing to do with race about how you speak. It's about how you've been brought up and what you've been taught to value. And so we were always taught to value education and to value, as my mom would say, speaking the King's English properly.
And that is what I call our familiars that shape us, that present us, that allows us to look in mirrors and say, this is who I am. And thank you so much for being so thorough in that presentation. Let's shift gears a little bit. Thinking back to your community, would you say that it was racist or not, and why?
Community meaning where I live, or where I lived, or community meaning the people that I was associated with?
Both.
Both. Community where I lived, I wouldn't say was racist that I can recall. It was a community that was, I would say, 85% African American. And that I can recall, there was not a lot of racism or racist attitudes within the community. Philadelphia is known as a very racist city, however. Even back in the days, we know about when Jackie Robinson came here and how he was treated here in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia was known as a northern city. It was known as one of the most racist northern cities. I think that I can recall growing up about different things. We had a particular mayor here who was very racist. And the way the police treated Black people here in this city was very racist. Recently, they, even with all of the George Floyd things and things that went out, they recently took down his statue, as a matter of fact. So Philadelphia has been known to be a racist city. And I certainly have experienced racism here in Philadelphia. I would say within my community, within the people that I connected with and that I associated with, my dad was very much about standing up for justice in regard to his students. And I wouldn't say that my dad was racist. I just feel that he stood up for what he believed in and how he felt his students should be treated, and about how he felt he should be treated. He was very vocal, very, very vocal about that. And so we grew up having that sense of pride in who we were and being able to be vocal and to speak up and to be advocates as far as dealing with racism. I hope that answered the question.
Very well. It leads into your first experience with racism, either yourself or someone you were connected with.
I would say my very first experience with racism was being followed around a store when I went into the store, being followed around in the store and being treated in a store as if I was less than a human being, and that I didn't have the money to be in the particular store, that I was in. I would say that was my very first encounter with racism. I had an encounter on a job where, and I wouldn't say it was necessarily racism, but I remember there was a particular agent. I was in insurance, and there was a particular agent who I would speak to on the phone regularly. And he said, I'm going to be up in the office, and, I'd like to meet you. And so when he came to meet me, he didn't know I was Black. His mouth dropped like, oh, you're Black. You get the, oh, you're Black look, because he didn't know I was Black by talking to me over the phone. So I would say those were my first very two memorable occasions of being racist. Though the second wasn't necessarily racist, it was just the idea that he figured I couldn't be Black because of the way I presented myself over the phone.
Which leads me into asking this question. How have you felt about the "you are so articulate" comment?
Miss Addi, it does something to me. It really does. It really does something to me, because to say that to me means that your expectation when you see me is that I'm not going to be. And so the fact that you can be surprised by it is troubling to me. It is really troubling, because again, it comes back to that idea that you've assumed you know who I am before you've had a conversation with me. And the fact that you can even say something like that to me, it's insulting.
Insult that is said as a compliment to you. See, that is also baffling. It is articulated as a "you are so on our side of this border.
Right.
And I give you this reward for being articulate like us."
Right.
It's interesting because President Obama was articulated, that's what I call it, by Joe Biden during his presidency. So no one is, is exempt.
Right. That is so true. That is so true. No one is exempt.
You lived for a while in Little Rock, Arkansas. Tell me about your racial encounters there.
Well, the first thing that really struck me was that was my first marriage, and my husband was a captain in the Army. And when we got down there, the first thing he did was he took me around and he showed me places I was not to go into. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is the 80s. What do you mean? He's like, these are places you are not to go into. Little Rock is a lot different than Philadelphia. Miss Addi, it was like, I just couldn't believe it. I just really couldn't believe it. And it was a very, very different experience for me. And even though, see, one of the things I think that was so different for me was that Philadelphia, yes, it's considered a racist city, but it was subtle racism. It wasn't the blatant racism that was there in Little Rock. Still, I mean, you would be hard pressed to see a Confederate flag flying in Philadelphia. But in Little Rock, Arkansas, they were all over the place. And so, and then the fact that there were certain places, here I was, a girl who believed I could go anywhere at any time that I wanted to go. And here I was being instructed in, these are the places that you are not to go. He showed me certain bars and restaurants and places that you just don't go in there because it's going to be a problem. And I don't want to have to. I don't want to have to deal with any problems. So, that was a very, very, very different experience for me. And I can't say that I didn't stay in Little Rock very long because it was just it just didn't sit well with me. And to hear people blatantly call you names and blatantly treat you a certain way. I mean, it was prominent, and it was something I was not used to. And many times we have these ideas of where we come from, and when we have to go to a new place, and you begin to think, how do people live here? How do they deal with this? And it began for me to be able to say, you know, I I don't understand how people lived in the South. I'm like, how did they even deal with this? And even now, as I'm watching Women of the Movement, I'm watching the Mamie Till and Emmett Till story, and I'm watching how, and even though these things, you do your history and you're brought up knowing these things, but seeing it and experiencing it is something altogether different, and I'm seeing this, and you can't look white people in the eye. And I'm like, I don't know how people manage to do it, but I'm coming from a different place. I understand. I'm coming from a different place, and I have to honestly give honor to people who were able to live through that, because coming from a different city and a different place, and it's just hard to even imagine how you can go about a whole day just having to keep your head down and not look white people in the eye and all these other things. It was just such an not that I couldn't look them in the eye in Little Rock by the late 80s, but still having the idea that there were places I couldn't go and that I was going to be treated a certain way just was hard for me.
Thank you for that very insightful encounter about not being able to be who you were taught and who you defined yourself to be. That opens up this whole world of, how do I look at someone and know what they have experienced?
Right.
Because what you talked about was a way of life. And
Yes.
when it becomes a way of life, as your father tried to channel in advocacy for his students, that there are standards that should be held to. But when those standards are, I am superior and you are inferior, you know it, I know it, and we will keep this before us.
Yes.
We talk about familiars because that's what we are taught and we teach our children.
Yes.
So growing up where blatant racism is the norm, why do we expect more from people who have been broken, maybe not broken, bent? And what is exciting for me is in every state and in every condition, we have Black people who rise above.
Yes.
So that is the hope. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
How have those experiences shaped Karen Moore today?
I believe that I am an advocate. I'm an advocate for justice. I'm an advocate for treating people the way you want to be treated. I believe that we have to really look at people and see who they are and show kindness and show love, and to really, for me, I believe that I'm here to help people understand that we're all human beings and we all have the right to live the way we desire to live, to have everything that we desire to have. We are in a country that says that that's how it's supposed to be, and that it should be that way for everyone that is in this country. And so it has caused me to be an advocate for justice. It has caused me to, especially my particular area of interest is colorism, and calling out colorism and getting people to understand that it does still exist. And it's something that we need to be addressing within our communities, both inside and outside of our communities. And so all of these different experiences have caused me to want to see us have a better world. And that if we are continually working and calling out different things and talking about different things, that we will be able to begin to see people differently. And I believe that's what it really takes, is taking the time to see people for who they are, where they are, and understand that there are experiences that we've all had, that if we take the time, we can experience different cultures, we can experience different communities, we can experience so many different things, and all of those things will cause us to be better people and to have just better understanding of the world we live in.
Beautifully said, because Maya Angelou said, "My friend, we have more in common than we do not."
Yes.
One of the beauties of America, the potential for America, is having so many different and diverse cultures.
Yes.
That we can have Chinese or Italian for lunch on our way to the Greek festival that evening.
Yes. Yes.
You know, we
Yes.
can meet people that we've read about in the sociology books, and we can have a conversation with them about their culture. We have the
Absolutely.
potential, if steered properly, to be a reflection to the world of how diverse people can get
Right.
along. That is my hope.
Yes.
And as you said, it takes listening, and it also takes appreciating who we are without apology.
Right.
We're going to
Absolutely.
talk about the color of beautiful, but let me ask a couple of questions before we get there. We hear so much about the wealth gap, the racial wealth gap. In America, it is, when we read the reports, Black Americans, ADOS, Black Americans, seem to fall at the bottom of this gap, even under, especially under whites, but even under other minority groups. In looking at this and understanding this, one of the things that is relevant is what we receive from generational wealth. So I ask you, do you know, how many Black people do you know who have enjoyed generational wealth, or at least a substantial inheritance?
Personally, wow. Not too many, Miss Addie. Not too many at all.
And that's
Um,
appreciated because you know a lot of people.
I
You know a
do.
lot of people across the country and in many different professions and doing education levels of success. And when you have to start from go,
Yes.
then it impacts those generational abundances. During the period of Black Wall Streets, we were able to amass small fortunes.
Yes.
And then with integration, we gained pride and dignity. But in many instances, we lost the dedicated Black dollar. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we we were so interested in being able to, in regard to segregation, able to go into these different places and stay in these different places and eat in these different places, that we were so interested and fighting for that, which I'm not saying that that shouldn't be the case, but I think that in the midst of all of that, we lost the value of having our own. We lost the value of having our own hotels, of having our own. Well, there are a lot of Black restaurants. We can honestly say there still are a lot of Black restaurants. But as far as hotels and banks and some of these other really, really big industries, that we lost having the value of being able to nonetheless have our own, because we had to have them back then, because we weren't allowed to stay in those places and we weren't allowed to go in those places. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, I think that the elimination of segregation had its great points, but I think that we lost still a lot in the midst of that. And that because of that, having to want to be included in mainstream and everything that was mainstream, we forgot about the value of having our own and being able to pass our own down to our children, and being able to say that we have something here that we can maintain and we can make money on and have that generational wealth, that we just lost it. I mean, now that it's amazing to me still in 2022, we're still having Black firsts. It's amazing to me. We're still having, this is the first Black person to be CEO of this company ever in its history. This is the first Black person. I think the other day I saw that it was the first Black woman to be, I can't remember. I don't even remember at this minute, Miss Addi. But we're still having a lot of firsts, is my point, even in 2022. And we are not, I don't think we're as focused anymore on generational wealth. I think it's a matter of, we still have that survival mentality. We just got to
Mm,
survive, instead of actually understanding about building generational wealth and being able to pass that down.
absolutely. It's a conundrum that we are challenged, we are enticed to assimilate.
Yes.
What does that mean? Does that mean giving up something? Does that mean melting into a pot and being like everybody else? And what has happened is that Black Americans, being that we're native to this place, we assimilate into it, and other cultures are able to maintain an identity. There's a level of assimilation, but we're still Nigerian.
Yes.
We're still Indian, we're still
Mhm.
Korean. And so that also adds to that wealth gap understanding or explanation.
Right.
But we could talk about that forever. Dr. Moore,
Yes.
given the efforts that you have made to educate the people about the initiatives that are important, uh, identity, and having right thinking, tell us about the color of beautiful initiative and why.
I I found that as I was doing my theater production, my spoken word theater production, Poetic Blues, A Sister Story, where we talk about the different blues that Black women face throughout their lives. And I found that when I was doing brown skin blues, women were really resonating with the what I talked about in my brown skin blues piece. And so I realized how many women were really hurting based on the experiences they had with being what we call deeply melanated at I Am the Color of Beautiful. We call it deeply melanated with their deeply melanated skin. Dark skin, some people have that has a certain connotation sometimes when you say dark skin. So we say deeply melanated. So I found that there was really a lot of hurt and trauma from colorism and from what deeply melanated women were experiencing and had experienced. And one of the things I say is that, if we don't heal, we bleed all over each other and we bleed on our children. And
Mm-hmm.
what our girls who are deeply melanated are going through and experiencing. And so there's got to a healing has got to take place. So I am the color of initiative. I am the color of global. I am the color of beautiful global initiative is about addressing colorism, bringing light to it, being able for people to have discussions and talk about it. And to also, I think one of the things that I have found that has been really interesting for me, because I remember when I started doing it, my sister, who's light skinned, told me that light skinned girls have blues too. And I'm thinking to myself, really? What kind of blues? What kind of blues you got?
Can't have nothing by ourselves, can we? They
Okay,
gotta
I'm
have
like, excuse me. But as
it
I listened to her and as I've talked to other women,
too. Hmm.
that this whole issue of colorism, it is a two-sided coin. A lot of people don't want to admit that, but it is. For me, I say that it is. And that, we have to understand on both sides. And I regularly tell people also that with colorism, as with racism, colorism has been called the daughter or the sister of racism. And one thing about it, I tell people that one having conversation is very important. And that's why one of the shows I do is Colorism Conversations, because having conversations is very important. And the fact that you cannot necessarily assume that every encounter that you have with a light skinned woman is because of colorism. Sometimes people are just having a bad day. It's the same thing with racism. Not every negative encounter with someone of another ethnicity or race is necessarily racism.
That's
They might just be having, now there are certain things that are just blatant racism. We can say that. And there are some things that are just blatant colorism. But on the other side of that, sometimes people are just having a bad day. It's not about race. It's not about religion. It's not about some of the things we think it's about. Sometimes it's just persons having a bad day or they're going through something. People have had so much loss
hmm.
over these last couple of years, and they've lost relatives, they've lost children. We're dealing with violence in our communities. We have people who are losing people to violence. So sometimes we have to be a little more empathetic and understanding and have conversations, find out why someone is feeling the way they're feeling on
Hmm.
any specific day. We can't call everything racism, we can't call everything colorism, but it still does nonetheless exist. And we have to be mindful and be educated and do what we can do to help call it out and resolve the issues.
Yes, yes. And it takes a person of insight to be able to lead those kinds of discussions. Because you say, when we throw everything into that kettle, somebody
Yes.
has to say, yes, but, and keep the conversation focused. So I'm
Yes.
glad that you're the person handling that.
Oh, thank you.
I always ask, given what you know today, do you really think that human beings can overcome race and ethnic hate, and why?
I do believe that for most people, there is the potential to overcome it. I think that it's going to take a lot of conversation, and it's going to take a lot of one of the things about conversation is you've got to be willing to listen also in a conversation, and you have to be willing to acknowledge what you're hearing and acknowledge someone else's experience. If
Mm,
I tell you that I have experienced racism and I tell you how it was that I experienced it, I do not expect you to not honor my experience and to say that that's not racism, to tell me that it's not racism or that I shouldn't take it that way. That's one thing, Miss Addie. Don't tell me how I'm supposed to feel. Okay. Do not tell me I shouldn't feel that way. Because if I feel that way, then what you should be doing, if you are really in a conversation with me and you care, is to find out why I feel that way. And I think that we have to listen to one another and validate each other's experiences. You know, I can't tell you how to feel. You can express to me experiences that you've had, and I've got to be willing to listen to that, and I've got to be willing to talk to you about how you reacted to that experience. How did that experience shape you? What did that experience, the questions that you've asked me today, we've got to be willing to ask questions and dig deeper and validate one another's experiences. If you are a white person and you've had a negative experience with a person of color, I have to be willing to listen to that. And I have to be willing to find out how that experience affected you and be able to talk to you about it, and to also be able to let you know that just because you've had that one experience or two or three with a person of color or with a white person, even a white person could tell me that doesn't mean that we're all that way. And that what you have to be willing to do is to open up and to see each person as an individual. We all come from different places. Just because I am a deeply melanated Black woman doesn't mean that the next deeply melanated Black woman has had the same experiences I've had. So you can't put us all into one category and talk about us all one way and feel one way about when each and every one of us has had individual experiences that have to be acknowledged and that have to be addressed and that have to be honored.
amen. That's why I want to talk to everyone. I want to hear everyone's experience. That is how we collect the data on how we can create solutions.
Yes.
And thinking about solutions, what 5 things would you suggest to us that could potentially improve race relations?
One of the things I think is that we have to realize that there is an issue. We have to acknowledge that there is an issue. You know, it's like they say, you can't You can't overcome what you won't admit. So I think we have to admit that there's a problem in this country and many countries, that there's a problem with it. It is an issue that needs to be addressed. So first we have to acknowledge that there is a problem. And I think the second thing is that something that I sort of was just talking about is we have to be willing to look at ourselves and our own ideas about race and about people and about ethnic backgrounds. We have to be willing to look at our own stereotypes, the things that we say, that we say about different ethnicities. you know, um, we're quick to say those things, and we're quick to adopt these ideas. And so we've got to look at ourselves and think, okay, what kind of stereotypes, what are we saying about other races, other ethnicities? What do I say about them that is not necessarily true about who they are, because of what I see in the media, or because of what someone said to me, or one or two experiences that I've had. So we have to look at our own beliefs and our own stereotypes. And the other thing is we have to engage in conversation. We have to have conversations. You cannot assume anything about anyone without having a conversation. And the other thing is to remember that we are all part of the human race. God created each and every one of us. And so each and every one of us, if you are particularly a believer, each and every one of us is made in the image of God. So when you look at someone else, that's the image of God. And so how are you going to respond or react or treat that person who is made in the image of God? And if we look at it that way, that we are all human beings, and that I always say that God is the master creator, and he as a creative, I'm a creative, I know that he as a creative would not have created people all the same race, all the same color, all that. He's a creative. So he, in his creativity, created us all different. And so even they say even twins don't have the exact same DNA. So he created all of us to be individuals in his own image. And if we look at each other that way, I think that we would have a whole different perspective on who the people are that are around us, what is standing in front of me, what I'm looking at. When I look at you, Miss Addi, I'm looking at the image of God. I'm looking at the image of God. So how can I treat you disrespectfully? How can I treat you any different than I would treat God and the image of God? And so the last thing I would say is that we have to imagine that the world could be as God saw it when he created it, that it would be a place of love and harmony and people coming together, blessed by all the creation that he's given us, and that we would respect not only creation, but respect each other.
Amen. Yes. I think that's called kingdom on earth.
Yes.
Now that's what we aspire to if we are believers.
Yes.
Now, and we got to have some roadmaps to get there. And I think there's one that has already been written. But
yes, yes, it has. Yes, it has.
Thank you for that. Final comments. Tell our people how they can connect with you and benefit from the productions that you have created.
Well, I am actually The Color of Beautiful everywhere on Facebook. And color is spelled COLOUR. The Color of Beautiful. We're on Facebook as The Color of Beautiful. Instagram is The Color of Beautiful. Our website is thecolorofbeautiful.black. And I would love for people to reach out to me. We are having International I Am the Color of Beautiful Day is coming up on April 2nd. and we're going to have a broadcast and be able to just enjoy the beauty of all of our colors of women of color. So if you go on the website, you'll be able to see how you can sign up and be part of International I Am the Color of Beautiful Day.
Look for me. I will be there, Dr. Moore.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time and your insight and your education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Addi. It was an honor.
Well, you continue to bless us. You have a wonderful day, darling.
Thank you, ma'am. You have a great day also.
It is remarkable to me that in 2022, colorism is still rampant in the world of enlightenment. Intelligent people ponder not only why colorism still exists, but their own relationship to colorism, racism, xenophobia, sexism, tribalism, and the costs of interest group allegiance over inclusion of all. Yes, we must talk racism now. This is Addi Banks. Learn more at letstalkracenow.com and subscribe to the Let's Talk Race Now YouTube channel.